3 maintenance reports sat unfinished on David Walsh's datapad, but the humming noise from Sector 12 wouldn't let him concentrate. He had been working on Meridian Watch Station for 8 months now, fixing broken air filters and checking temperature controls in places most aliens never bothered to visit. Down here in the lower engineering levels, the walls were plain metal and the lighting was dim. No fancy decorations like the upper decks where ambassadors walked around making important decisions. David didn't mind the quiet. Back on Earth, he'd worked as a building superintendent in Seattle. This job wasn't so different, just with more species to avoid annoying. Most aliens barely noticed him anyway. Humans were still new to the whole galactic community thing. They weren't warriors like the Draconids or brilliant scientists like the Quillen, just regular people trying to find their place among the stars. The humming got louder. David sighed and grabbed his toolkit. Somewhere above him in the fancy diplomatic quarters, something terrible was happening. High Mother Sareth of the Draconid people stood in her nursery chamber, staring at 3 empty warming pods. Her crystalline scales, normally a deep purple, had gone completely white. This was impossible. The security systems were top grade. The walls were reinforced. No one could have gotten in, but her hatchlings were gone. Within minutes, alarms screamed through every level of the station. Security doors slammed shut. Armed guards appeared in every corridor. The other ambassadors gathered quickly, their faces showing worry. Everyone knew what this meant. Draconids were one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. They had destroyed entire fleets over smaller insults than this. 3 missing hatchlings could start a war. David heard the alarms and stopped walking. His radio crackled with confused voices. Something about a lockdown, something about staying where he was. He looked around the empty corridor and shrugged. He was already in the middle of nowhere. Might as well fix that humming noise while he waited for the all-clear. The storage bay in Sector 12 looked like nobody had visited it in years. Dust-covered old cargo containers stacked against the walls. The humming came from a thermal regulator in the corner, its display flashing red. David knelt down and opened the panel. Just as he thought, a loose connection. Easy fix. That's when he heard the sound. Tiny chirping noises, so quiet he almost missed them. David froze and listened. There it was again, coming from behind the cargo containers. It sounded like birds but higher pitched, almost like crying. David stood up and walked toward the sound. He squeezed between 2 large containers and found himself in a small space against the back wall. The temperature here was much colder than the rest of the bay. Ice had formed along the metal panels. 3 small creatures huddled together in the corner, shivering. They were beautiful. Their scales shimmered like crystals, catching the dim light and reflecting it in rainbow patterns. They had long necks and delicate wings folded against their bodies. Their eyes were huge and dark, filled with fear. Each one was about the size of a cat, maybe smaller. David didn't know what they were, but he knew they were dying. He pulled off his jacket without thinking. The creatures made frightened noises as he approached, but they were too weak to run. David wrapped his jacket around all 3 of them, gathering them carefully into his arms. They were ice cold against his skin. "It's okay," he whispered, pulling them close to his chest. "I've got you." The creatures went quiet. He felt them press against him, seeking his warmth. Their shivering slowed down. One of them made a soft sound, almost like a purr. David tried his radio. Nothing but static. The lockdown must have disrupted the lower-level communications. He would have to carry these creatures to the nearest checkpoint and hand them over to security. Somebody probably lost them. They looked expensive. He started walking, keeping the creatures tucked inside his jacket against his chest. They stayed perfectly still, as if they knew he was helping them. David took the long route through the maintenance tunnels, avoiding the main corridors where security would be running around. After about 10 minutes, the creatures started warming up. Their shivering stopped completely. David felt something strange then, like a warm feeling spreading through his chest. Not physical warmth, but something else, something that made him feel calm and happy. The creatures began purring louder. Their scales started glowing softly, pulsing with a gentle light. David looked down at them amazed. What were these things? He turned a corner and nearly ran into a security drone. The floating machine stopped and scanned him with a red beam. Then it scanned the creatures in his jacket. Something beeped. Draconid hatchlings identified, the drone announced in a mechanical voice. Suspect detected. Security alerted. David's stomach dropped. Wait, no, I just found them. They were freezing and remain where you are. The drone moved closer. David heard shouting from the corridor behind him. Heavy footsteps. Lots of them. The creatures in his jacket made frightened sounds. Their tiny claws gripped his shirt. David felt their fear like it was his own. He ran. The maintenance tunnels twisted and turned, and David knew them better than any security guard. He ran through passages meant for repair crews, climbed down ladders into sublevels, and finally found an old observation deck that nobody used anymore. He slipped inside and locked the door. His heart pounded. The creatures were chirping in distress. David sat down on the floor and opened his jacket. The 3 hatchlings looked up at him with those huge dark eyes. "It's okay," he said again, though he wasn't sure it was. "We're safe here." The hatchlings crawled out of the jacket but stayed pressed against his body. One curled around his neck. Another nestled in the crook of his arm. The third sprawled across his chest, its tail wrapping around his shoulder. They were purring again, their scales glowing softly in the darkness. David leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes. Somewhere out there, people were hunting him. He didn't understand why. He was just trying to help. The hatchling's purring grew louder, syncing with his heartbeat. Despite everything, David felt himself relaxing. Whatever happened next, at least these little creatures were safe and warm. For now, that would have to be enough. David's back ached from sitting on the cold floor. He had been hiding in the abandoned observation deck for an hour, maybe more. Time felt strange with 3 alien creatures sleeping on his chest. Every time he tried to move, they made unhappy sounds and gripped his shirt tighter with their tiny claws. Through the window, he could see the station's main ring rotating slowly in the distance. Somewhere out there, people were searching for him. His face was probably on every screen by now. David Walsh, maintenance worker, kidnapper of sacred alien babies. His mom back on Earth would be so proud. One of the hatchlings yawned, showing tiny, sharp teeth. Its scales rippled with color, shifting from purple to blue to green. David watched in fascination. They were definitely feeling better. Their bodies were warm now, and they seemed relaxed. The one around his neck kept nuzzling his jaw like an affectionate cat. "I need to turn you in," David told them quietly. "This is a huge misunderstanding, but I can explain it to security. They'll understand once I tell them I found you freezing in that storage bay." The hatchlings just purred louder. David sighed and pulled out his datapad. Still no signal. The lockdown had really done a number on the lower levels. He needed to get to a communication terminal, but that meant going into the main corridors where security would spot him immediately. He started to stand up. The hatchlings made sharp, distressed sounds that hurt his ears. The feeling of panic wasn't just theirs anymore. David felt it in his own chest, like someone had grabbed his heart and squeezed. He sat back down quickly. Okay, he said. "We'll stay a little longer." The hatchlings settled down immediately, going back to their purring. David frowned. Something weird was happening. He could feel their emotions now as clear as his own thoughts. Comfort, safety, belonging. They were showing him things too, images in his mind. A vent shaft. Darkness, cold, fear. "You escaped on your own," David said slowly, understanding. "You crawled through the ventilation and got lost." The hatchling on his chest looked up at him and chirped. David felt a wave of agreement. "Well, that's great. That means nobody stole you, but I still need to get you back to your mother before she destroys the station looking for you." More distressed sounds. The feeling of fear again, but this time directed at something else. Someone else. David saw an image in his mind of a tall figure with purple scales and cold eyes. Authority. Power. Anger. "Is that your mom?" David asked. "Are you afraid of her?" The hatchlings didn't answer, but David felt their uncertainty. It wasn't exactly fear, more like the feeling of not fitting in, of being expected to be something they weren't ready to be. David knew that feeling well enough. He'd felt it his whole life. "I get it," he said softly, stroking the scales of the one on his chest. "But she's probably worried sick about you." A sudden noise from outside the door made them all freeze. Footsteps, heavy ones. Multiple people walking past the observation deck. David held his breath. The hatchlings went completely silent, their glowing scales dimming until they were almost invisible in the darkness. "Check every room," a deep voice said in the corridor. "The human cannot have gone far." More footsteps. The door handle rattled. David's heart hammered. He pressed himself against the wall, holding the hatchlings close. This was it. They were caught. Then something incredible happened. The air around David shimmered like heat waves on a summer road. He felt a tingling sensation across his skin. The hatchling's scales pulsed once with bright light, then went dark again. The door opened. A tall figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the corridor lights. Draconid warrior, David's mind supplied, 7 feet tall, covered in dark scales, carrying a weapon that hummed with energy. The warrior's eyes swept across the room, passing right over David and the hatchlings huddled in the corner. "Empty," the warrior said, and closed the door. David didn't breathe until the footsteps faded away. When he finally gasped for air, the hatchlings chirped softly and their scales brightened again. "Did you do that?" David whispered. "Did you hide us?" The hatchlings seemed just as surprised as he was. They looked at each other and made questioning sounds. Whatever had happened, they hadn't done it on purpose. David's datapad suddenly buzzed. A message had gotten through. He grabbed it and read quickly. "David, it's Helen. I know you didn't take those hatchlings. I saw the security footage. But you need to turn yourself in before someone gets hurt. The Draconids are furious. They have shoot-on-sight orders if you resist. Please just bring the babies to the security office on deck 7. I'll be there. We can sort this out. Please respond." Helen Grant was his supervisor, the one who'd hired him for this job. She'd always been fair to him. If she said she could sort this out, maybe she could. David started to type a response. The hatchling on his neck made a sad sound. David felt its emotions clearly. Trust. Fear of losing him. "Please don't leave. I won't abandon you," David promised. "I'll make sure you're safe." But even as he said it, he wondered if that was true. What happened to alien babies who didn't act the way they were supposed to, who crawled away from their mother and bonded with a stranger? Would they be punished? Would they be forced to stay in that nursery they'd escaped from? David looked down at the 3 creatures cuddled against him. They trusted him completely. He could feel it. They'd chosen him for some reason, and breaking that trust felt wrong. His datapad buzzed again. Another message, this time from station security. An official warrant for his arrest, kidnapping, endangering protected species, possible trafficking charges. 20 years in a galactic prison if convicted. 20 years, David muttered, for saving your lives. The hatchlings purred sympathetically. David made a decision. He would turn himself in, but not to some random security office where trigger-happy warriors might shoot first and ask questions later. He would go straight to their mother, High Mother Sareth herself. She deserved to know the truth, and he would tell her face to face. He just had to get to the diplomatic levels without getting killed first. "All right," David said, standing up carefully. The hatchlings adjusted their positions but stayed attached to him. "We're going to go on a little trip. Stay quiet. Stay hidden, and whatever you did to make that warrior not see us. It would be great if you could do it again," the hatchlings chirped in. Agreement. David opened the door, slowly, and checked the corridor. Empty. He stepped out and started walking toward the service elevators. The hatchling's warmth against his chest gave him courage. Whatever happened next, at least he wasn't alone. 2 decks up, hiding behind a cargo loader, David heard voices. Security teams coordinating their search. They were checking every room, every corridor, every possible hiding spot. The net was closing. The hatchling around his neck suddenly tensed. David felt a warning pulse. Danger. Close. Coming this way. He looked around frantically. Nowhere to hide. 3 armed security officers rounded the corner, walking straight toward him. The hatchling's scales flashed bright white. David felt that shimmering sensation again, stronger this time. The air bent around them like glass. The security officers walked right past him, talking among themselves about checking the cargo bay. They never looked his way once. When they were gone, David let out a shaky breath. The hatchlings made proud chirping sounds. "You're protecting me," David realized. "But I'm supposed to be protecting you." The hatchling on his chest looked up at him with those huge dark eyes. David felt its simple, honest emotion. "We protect each other." David smiled despite everything. "Yeah," he said. "I guess we do." Helen Grant stared at the security footage for the 15th time. There was David, climbing between cargo containers in the abandoned storage bay. There were the 3 hatchlings huddled and shivering in the corner. There was David taking off his jacket without hesitation, wrapping up the babies, holding them close. "He's not a kidnapper," Helen said to the security chief sitting across from her. "He found them dying and saved their lives. The security chief, a four-armed Quellan named Driss, shook his head. The Draconids don't see it that way. To them, a human touching their sacred young is an insult worth killing over. High Mother Sareth wants his head. Then she's an idiot, Helen snapped. Her babies are alive because of David. Tell her that. Helen had tried. She'd requested an audience with High Mother Sareth 3 times. Each time she'd been refused. The Draconid leader was beyond reason, consumed by rage and grief. She believed her hatchlings had been stolen by a primitive human who intended to sell them on the black market. Across the station, in the diplomatic quarters, High Mother Sareth stood before a holographic display showing David's last known location. Her warriors surrounded her, waiting for orders. Her scales had turned completely black, a color that meant murder in Draconid culture. Find the human, she said quietly. If he resists, kill him. The hatchlings are to be recovered unharmed. I want this done within the hour. Yes, High Mother, the warriors said in unison, and left to hunt. Sareth stared at the display after they'd gone. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the anger and wounded pride, a small voice asked questions she didn't want to hear. Why had her hatchlings escaped? Why had they gone to such lengths to get away from her? What kind of mother loses her children before they're even a month old? She silenced those questions. There would be time for self-reflection after the human was punished. David was lost. The service elevator had taken him to Deck 9 instead of Deck 7, and now he was in a section he'd never serviced before. The corridors here were wider, with decorative panels on the walls and soft lighting. Important people lived here. People who wouldn't appreciate a wanted human running through their neighborhood. The hatchlings sensed his stress and tried to calm him with their purring. It helped a little. David found an empty conference room and slipped inside to catch his breath and figure out his next move. His data pad showed a station map, but security had locked most of his access. He couldn't use the elevators anymore without triggering alarms. The maintenance shafts were his best bet, but they didn't go all the way to the diplomatic levels. He'd have to cross through public areas eventually. This would be easier if I could just call someone and explain, David muttered. But no, everyone's too busy trying to shoot me. The hatchling around his neck nuzzled his jaw sympathetically. A sound from the corridor made David look up. Voices. Getting closer. He moved to the door and peered through the small window. 3 Draconid warriors walked past, their weapons ready, their eyes scanning everything. David backed away from the door. The hatchlings went silent, their scales dimming. He felt their power building again, that strange shimmer in the air that made people not see them. But this time it didn't work. The door burst open. A warrior stood there, weapon pointed directly at David's chest. The Draconid's eyes widened when he saw the hatchlings. Stand still, human, the warrior ordered. Put the hatchlings on the ground and step away from them. I found them, David said quickly. They were freezing in a storage bay. I saved them. I said put them down. David started to move, but the hatchlings made terrified sounds and clung tighter to him. He felt their fear like ice water in his veins. They didn't want to go back. They were screaming it in his mind. Not back to the cold place. Not back to being alone. They don't want to go, David said. The warrior's scales darkened with anger. You dare to speak for them? You are nothing. A primitive. Hand them over now or I will take them by force. 2 more warriors entered the room, blocking any escape. David's heart raced. The hatchlings were shaking against him. Please, David said. Just let me talk to their mother. I can explain everything. High Mother Sareth does not speak with thieves. The first warrior reached for the hatchlings. His clawed hand grabbed the one on David's chest, trying to pull it away. The hatchling screeched. David felt its pain and terror as if someone was tearing his own heart out. Then everything exploded. The hatchling's scales flashed brilliant white, so bright David had to close his eyes. A sound filled the room, inside his head and outside it at the same time. Not a noise exactly, but a feeling-given voice. A psychic scream that meant one thing: do not harm our chosen one. The warriors collapsed. One fell to his knees, clutching his head. Another stumbled backward into the corridor. The third simply dropped his weapon and stared at the hatchlings in shock. The scream echoed through the station. Every Draconid felt it. In her quarters, High Mother Sareth gasped and fell against the wall, one hand pressed to her chest. The power in that scream was immense, primal and completely protective of the human they were trying to take them from. The hatchling's glow faded. They pressed against David, making soft, worried sounds. He could feel their concern for him mixed with confusion about what they'd just done. David looked at the warriors. They were recovering, but slowly. He didn't have much time. He ran. Behind him, he heard the warriors shouting into their communicators. Ahead of him, alarms started blaring. Every Draconid on the station had felt that psychic scream and knew where it came from. They were all coming now. David ran through corridors, the hatchlings clinging to him. He could hear heavy footsteps behind him getting closer. He turned a corner and nearly collided with a tall alien in a white coat. "Easy there," the alien said. She had silver skin and too many eyes arranged in a circle around her face. "Aquilin," David remembered. "Scientists and doctors, sorry," David gasped, trying to get around her. The alien grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Wait, you're the human everyone's looking for." "I didn't kidnap them," David said desperately. "I swear. I found them and they won't let me put them down." The alien looked at the hatchlings. Her many eyes blinked in sequence. "Interesting. Very interesting. I'm Dr. Nira. Come with me quickly before those warriors catch up." "Why would you help me?" "Because I just felt what those hatchlings did to protect you, and I have several questions about it." "Now move." Dr. Nira led him through a side door into what looked like a medical bay. She locked the door and pulled David into a back room filled with scanning equipment. "Sit down," she ordered. "Let me look at them." David sat. The hatchlings watched Dr. Nira carefully but didn't seem afraid of her. The doctor pulled out a small device and waved it over the hatchlings, studying the readouts. "Remarkable," she muttered. "The psychic bond is fully formed. I've never seen it happen this fast." "What bond?" David asked. Draconid hatchlings bond with their primary caregiver through a psychic link. It usually takes months and only works with their biological mother, but yours formed in hours with a completely different species. Dr. Nira looked at David with all her eyes. "What did you do to them?" "I just kept them warm. They were dying." "No, you did more than that. You cared for them without expecting anything in return. No cultural obligations, no political advantages, just pure compassion. Draconid hatchlings seek beings whose soul frequency resonates with their needs. You gave them something they couldn't get from their own people." "What's that?" "Unconditional love," Dr. Nira said simply. "And now they've bonded with you instead of their mother. This is going to cause a massive diplomatic incident," David heard shouting from outside. Warriors demanding entry to the medical bay. Dr. Nira sighed. "Time to face the music," she said. "But don't worry. I'll help you explain. High Mother Sareth needs to understand what's happened here, whether she likes it or not." Dr. Nira opened the medical bay doors to face a dozen armed Draconid warriors. They filled the corridor, weapons raised, scales dark with aggression. At the front stood a warrior larger than the others, with scars across his neck and murder in his eyes. "Hand over the human," the scarred warrior demanded. "I will do no such thing," Dr. Nira replied calmly. "This human is under my protection as a medical patient. Station law is clear on this matter. Station law does not apply to thieves and kidnappers. He is neither. I have examined the evidence and the hatchlings themselves. This human saved their lives." Dr. Nira held up her scanning device. "I have medical proof of hypothermia that would have killed them within the hour. David Walsh found them and provided life-saving care." The scarred warrior hesitated, but only for a moment. "That is for High Mother Sareth to decide." "Stand aside, Doctor." "Fine," Dr. Nira said. "Then take us all to her together. Let her hear the truth directly." Behind the warriors, a voice spoke. "That will not be necessary. I am here." The warriors moved aside instantly. High Mother Sareth walked through their ranks like a queen through her court. She was enormous, nearly 8 feet tall, with scales that shifted between black and deep purple. Her eyes were ancient and cold. She looked at Dr. Nira briefly, then focused entirely on David. David stood up slowly, keeping the hatchlings close to his chest. They made nervous sounds but didn't try to hide. Sareth stared at her children, and David saw something flicker across her face. Relief, maybe, or pain. It was hard to tell. "My hatchlings," Sareth said softly. "You are unharmed." The hatchlings chirped in response but pressed closer to David. Sareth's scales darkened. "Human, you will release them to me now." "I can't," David said. His voice shook, but he kept talking. "I mean, I would if I could, but they won't let me put them down. Every time I try, they get upset. They are frightened. You have confused them with your alien scent." "No," Dr. Nira interrupted. "They have bonded with him. The psychic link is complete. Sareth's head snapped toward the doctor. Impossible. Hatchlings bond only with their mother. Usually, yes, but not always. The bond forms with whoever provides the care they need at the critical moment. This human found them dying and gave them warmth, safety, and protection without hesitation. The hatchlings responded to his soul frequency. Soul frequency? Sareth repeated the words like they tasted bad. You expect me to believe that this primitive human has a soul frequency compatible with Draconid young? We are an ancient species. Humans are barely off their homeworld. And yet the evidence is right in front of you, Dr. Nira said. Those hatchlings just released a psychic scream powerful enough to knock down your best warriors. They did it to protect him. That level of power only comes from a fully formed bond. Sareth was silent for a long moment. She looked at her hatchlings again, and this time David saw the pain clearly. She reached out one clawed hand toward them. The hatchlings pulled back and made frightened sounds. Sareth's hand dropped. Her scales went completely black. What have you done to them? She asked David, her voice deadly quiet. Nothing, David said. I swear. I just found them in a storage bay. They were freezing and scared. I kept them warm. That's all. That is not all. They fear me. Their own mother. What poison did you feed them? I didn't poison them. I didn't even know what they were until an hour ago. Sareth moved closer. The warriors tensed, ready to act if she gave the order. Do you know what you have done, human? Do you understand the consequences of interfering with Draconid young? I saved their lives, David said, anger replacing his fear. They were dying. I'm sorry if that offends you, but I'm not sorry I did it. You should be sorry. You should be begging for mercy. Sareth's scales rippled with rage. In Draconid culture, our young are sacred. They are raised according to traditions thousands of years old. They are taught discipline, honor, and strength from the moment they hatch. You have corrupted that. You have made them weak. The hatchlings made angry sounds at that. David felt their emotions surge. Not weak, strong, protected, safe. They don't think they're weak, David said. They think they're safe with me. Because you have confused them. Or maybe because I actually care about them. David shot back. Maybe they ran away from you because they were scared and alone, and needed someone to just hold them without expecting them to be something they're not ready to be. The corridor went silent. Every warrior stared at David in shock. Nobody spoke to High Mother Sareth that way. Nobody. Sareth's scales turned so dark they were almost black holes. You dare lecture me on caring for my own children? Yes, David said. Because they're not your property. They're babies. They're scared and they need comfort, not discipline. They need someone to love them, not train them to be warriors before they can even walk properly. You know nothing about our culture. I know your culture let them crawl into a ventilation shaft and get lost in the freezing cold, David said. I know they were crying for help and nobody heard them except me. So yeah, maybe I don't know about Draconid culture, but I know how to keep babies alive. Sareth raised one hand. For a moment, David thought she would strike him. The warriors certainly thought so. They moved forward, ready to grab him. Then Sareth lowered her hand. Her scales shifted to gray. Dr. Nira, explain this bond to me. Can it be broken? Not without killing the hatchlings, Dr. Nira said quietly. Once formed, the psychic bond is permanent. Breaking it would destroy their minds. Then what do you suggest? You have two choices. Either you accept this human as part of your hatchlings' lives or you lose them entirely. Sareth looked at her children again. They stared back at her from the safety of David's arms. One of them chirped softly, a questioning sound. David felt its emotion. It wanted its mother. It just didn't want to be forced into a role it wasn't ready for. They still love you, David said softly. They're just scared. Of me, Sareth said bitterly. Of disappointing you. Of not being what you expect. That's different, Sareth closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her scales had shifted to a lighter purple. What is your name, human? David Walsh. David Walsh. You have created an impossible situation. My culture has laws about this. Sacred laws that have not been invoked in 1,000 years. What laws? Dr. Nira asked. The law of the bond guardian. In ancient times, when our species was young, sometimes hatchlings would bond with other creatures. Warriors who saved them from danger. Healers who nursed them through sickness. These beings were given a title and a role. They were allowed to help raise the hatchlings alongside the biological parent. A shared custody arrangement, Dr. Nira said. More than that, A sacred duty. The bond guardian becomes part of the family, with all the rights and responsibilities that implies. Sareth looked at David. It would mean staying on this station, living in quarters near the diplomatic section, spending every day with my hatchlings helping them grow. And you'd be okay with that? David asked. No, Sareth said honestly. I despise the idea. You are human. You are nothing. Having you anywhere near my children goes against everything I believe. Then why suggest it? Because the alternative is losing them entirely, Sareth said, her voice breaking slightly. And I find that I am not willing to do that. Not even for my pride, the hatchlings chirped. David felt their hope. They wanted both, their mother and their guardian. The strength of tradition and the warmth of unconditional love. I'll do it, David said. If you'll let me. Sareth nodded slowly. Then it is decided. I will formally declare you bond guardian to my hatchlings. You will attend the ceremony tomorrow in front of the full diplomatic assembly. Wait, what ceremony? The one where you become part of Draconid culture whether you like it or not, Sareth said. She looked at her hatchlings one more time, then turned and walked away, her warriors following. Dr. Nira let out a breath. Well, that went better than expected. She hates me, David said. Yes, but she loves her children more than she hates you. That's something. Dr. Nira smiled with too many teeth. Congratulations, David Walsh. You just became the first human bond guardian in Draconid history. The hatchlings purred happily against David's chest. David sank down into a chair, suddenly exhausted. I just wanted to fix a thermal regulator. Such is life, Dr. Nira said cheerfully. Now let's get you and those babies some food. You all look like you're about to collapse. David had never been inside the Grand Assembly Hall before. Maintenance workers didn't usually get invited to diplomatic ceremonies. The hall was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. Representatives from dozens of species sat in circular rows, all of them staring at him. The hatchlings clung to David's formal uniform, which Helen had somehow found for him on short notice. It was too tight around the shoulders, but at least he didn't look like a maintenance worker anymore. He felt like an idiot, though, standing in front of the entire diplomatic community while aliens whispered about him in languages he didn't understand. High Mother Sareth stood beside him on the raised platform. She wore elaborate ceremonial robes that made her look even more imposing. Her scales were a deep, formal purple. She hadn't looked at David once since the ceremony began. An elderly Draconid with silver scales was speaking, reading from an ancient text in the Draconid language. Dr. Nira stood nearby, translating in whispers. He's reciting the history of the Bond Guardian Law, she explained. How it came to be, why it exists, what it means. This is very important to them. How long will this take? David whispered back. Hours, probably. Draconids love ceremony. David suppressed a groan. The hatchlings at least seemed content. They had grown noticeably in the past day, now almost twice the size they'd been when he found them. They were still small enough to cuddle against him, but their wings had developed more and their scales were brighter. The elderly Draconid finished his speech and turned to Sareth. She stepped forward and began speaking in her own language, her voice echoing through the hall. Dr. Nira continued translating. I, High Mother Sareth of the Draconid people, do formally recognize the bond between this human and my hatchlings. Though it defies tradition, the bond is sacred and cannot be broken. Therefore, I invoke the ancient law and name David Walsh as bond guardian. Sareth turned to David for the first time. Her eyes were unreadable. Kneel, she said in English. David knelt, careful not to disturb the hatchlings. Sareth placed one clawed hand on his head. It was surprisingly gentle. Do you swear to protect these hatchlings with your life? She asked. I do, David said. Do you swear to guide them with wisdom and care? I do. Do you swear to honor Draconid culture and help them grow into strong, worthy members of their species? David hesitated. The hatchlings looked up at him, their eyes trusting. I swear to help them grow into whoever they're meant to be, he said carefully. Whether that's what tradition expects or something different. The hall erupted in whispers. Several Draconid representatives looked angry, but Sareth just stared at David for a long moment, then nodded. Close enough, she said quietly. Rise, Bond Guardian David Walsh. David stood. The hatchlings chirped happily. Sareth addressed the assembly again in Draconid, then walked off the platform without another word to David. Dr. Nira appeared at his elbow. Well, you're official now. Congratulations. Did I mess that up at the end? You modified a sacred oath in front of the entire diplomatic community. So yes. But Sarith accepted it anyway, which means she's not as rigid as she pretends to be. Helen pushed through the crowd and hugged David. You did great. Though next time maybe stick to the exact words. There's going to be a next time. Who knows? You're making history here. Helen smiled. The station administrator wants to talk to you later. Something about a new position. Better pay, better quarters. Apparently having a human bond guardian is good publicity. I just want to sleep for a week, David said. You'll have to wait. Sarith wants you to move into your new quarters today so the hatchlings can get settled. Helen handed him a data pad with the address. It's right next to the Draconid diplomatic section. Very fancy? Over the next few days, David settled into his new life. The quarters were incredible, at least 5 times the size of his old room. The hatchlings had their own space with warming pods and sleeping nests, though they preferred to sleep curled up on David's bed. Sarith visited every morning. The meetings were awkward and tense. She would sit in David's living area, stiff and formal, while the hatchlings divided their time between both of them. David could see how much it hurt her when they ran to him first, but she never said anything about it. They need to learn our history, Sarith said one morning. Our language, our customs, our fighting techniques. They're 3 weeks old, David pointed out. It is never too early to begin training. It's way too early. They're babies. They should be playing and exploring, not memorizing history lessons. Sarith's scales darkened. You know nothing about raising Draconid young. And you apparently know nothing about letting kids be kids, David shot back. They glared at each other. The hatchlings, sensing the tension, made worried sounds and pressed against David. One of them sent him an image. Sarith, alone, reading from a large book in an empty room. David's anger faded. You were trained that way too, weren't you? History lessons and fighting practice from the day you hatched. Sarith looked away. That is how it is done. Did you like it? That is not relevant. It is relevant. You're doing to them what was done to you and you hated it. David could see the truth in her face. You don't have to repeat the same mistakes. They are not mistakes. They are traditions. Some traditions need to die, David said softly. Sarith stood up abruptly. You overstep, human. She left without saying goodbye to the hatchlings, but the next morning she came back. And the morning after that. Slowly the visits got easier. Sarith started sitting on the floor instead of in a chair. She watched the hatchlings play instead of lecturing them. When one brought her a toy, she actually played back, chasing it around the room while it chirped with delight. David watched from the kitchen, making breakfast. When Sarith caught him looking, she quickly stopped playing and straightened up, trying to look dignified. But David had seen the smile on her face. You're good with them, David said. Sarith didn't respond for a moment. Then, quietly, I was raised to be a leader, not a mother. You can be both, can I? Sarith looked at her hatchlings. They love you more than me. That's not true. They love both of us. They just express it differently. David brought her a cup of the Draconid tea she preferred. They're excited and playful with me because I let them be wild. They're calmer and more respectful with you because they know you're important. You're their mother. That bond doesn't go away just because I'm here. The bond is different now, changed. Different doesn't mean worse. Sarith sipped her tea. Dr. Nera says humans have a concept called co-parenting. Raising children together even when the parents are not bonded mates. Yeah, that's common on Earth. It is not common among Draconids. We raise our young alone, proving our strength and capability. To need help is seen as weakness. That's stupid, David said. When Sarith glared at him, he shrugged. Sorry, but it is. Raising kids is hard. Having help doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart. Sarith was quiet for a long time. Then perhaps you are right. Perhaps our traditions have made us strong but also lonely. It was the first real thing she'd said to him. Not a formal statement or a cold command, but an actual thought from an actual person. David sat down across from her. We don't have to do this the Draconid way or the human way, he said. We can figure out our own way. What works for these 3 specific kids, Garth? They are hatchlings, not kids. Same thing. Sarith almost smiled. You are frustrating, David Walsh. Yeah, I get that a lot. One of the hatchlings climbed into Sarith's lap. Another curled around David's neck. The third sprawled between them, tail touching both. They purred contentedly, scales glowing with happiness. They are content, Sareth observed. I have never seen hatchlings so at peace, because they have both of us. They get your strength and my warmth. That's not a bad combination. No, Sareth agreed. Perhaps it is not. Outside David's quarters, the rest of the station was adjusting to the new reality. The story had spread across the galaxy. A human maintenance worker had saved 3 draconid hatchlings and been named their bond guardian. The implications were being debated in government chambers and scientific journals. Ambassador Trill of the Quillen Science Council submitted a formal proposal to study human empathy as a potential asset in diplomatic relations. The Vereen Military Alliance quietly updated their assessment of Earth from minor threat to potential ally worth, cultivating 3 different species, requested human representatives for their childcare facilities. Helen watched the news reports and shook her head in amazement. David's accidentally made humans relevant on the galactic stage. By being himself, Dr. Nira added. She was writing a paper about the bonding phenomenon. That is what makes it so significant. He did not try to impress anyone. He simply cared. That's David, Helen said fondly. He cares about everyone, even when he probably shouldn't. In his quarters, David didn't know he was changing the galaxy's perception of humanity. He was too busy trying to keep 3 increasingly energetic hatchlings from destroying his furniture. They were flying now, short bursts that sent them bouncing off walls and ceiling. Sareth watched the chaos with what might have been amusement. They are developing quickly. Too quickly, David said, catching one before it crashed into a lamp. Do they have an off switch? Not until they are fully grown. Great. When's that? About 20 years. David stared at her in horror. Sareth made a sound that could have been a laugh. 3 months had passed since the ceremony. The hatchlings were now the size of large dogs, with fully developed wings and scales that shimmered in colors that changed with their moods. They had names now, too. David had suggested it one day, and Sareth had reluctantly agreed. River, Storm, and Dawn. Simple names that seemed to fit their personalities. River was calm and thoughtful. Storm was energetic and mischievous. Dawn was gentle and always trying to make peace between the other 2. They were sleeping now in their usual formation. River curled around David's neck like a scarf. Storm sprawled across his chest, snoring softly. Dawn nestled against his side, her tail wrapped around his arm. David had given up trying to get them to sleep in their own beds. This was where they wanted to be. Sareth sat in the chair nearby, reading reports on her datapad. She visited every evening now, usually staying for dinner. Sometimes she even stayed after the hatchlings went to sleep, drinking tea and talking with David about nothing important. Politics, station gossip, the weather on their respective homeworlds. There is a delegation from Earth arriving next week, Sareth said without looking up from her pad. They want to meet you. Why? Because you are famous. The first human bond guardian. They want to study how you did it. Sareth finally looked at him. They also want to establish formal relations with the Draconid people. Using your connection with my hatchlings as a foundation. That's weird. That is politics. Sareth set down her pad. I have been asked to accompany the delegation to Earth for a cultural exchange. 2 months visiting your homeworld, meeting with your leaders. David felt something twist in his chest. Oh, that's good. Important for relations and everything. The hatchlings would come with me, of course, or right, of course. Unless you came as well. David looked up. Sareth was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. Me? You are their bond guardian. They need both of us. Sareth's scales shifted to a softer purple. I am told Earth has places called parks where young ones can play freely. And museums with ancient artifacts. Storm would destroy them naturally, but it might be educational. You want me to come to Earth with you? I am asking if you would consider it. As a co-parent, not as a servant or employee. We would be equals in this. David stared at her. 3 months ago, Sareth had wanted him dead. Now she was inviting him on a diplomatic mission to his own planet. As an equal. Yeah, David said. I'd like that. Sareth nodded, her scales brightening slightly. Good. The delegation will be pleased. Dr. Nira is coming as well. She wants to observe how the hatchlings interact with Earth's environment. This is all very official suddenly. You changed things, David, whether you meant to or not. Sareth looked at the sleeping hatchlings. 3 months ago, I believed humans were primitive and irrelevant. Now I am planning to visit your world and learn about your culture. Because if you can raise my children better than I could alone, then perhaps there is something to learn from your people after all. We're not that special. You saved 3 dying hatchlings without hesitation. You stood up to me when I was ready to kill you. You changed 1,000 years of tradition because you thought it was right. Sareth met his eyes. That is special. Before David could respond, Storm woke up and yawned, showing all his teeth. He looked around, saw both his parents together, and made a happy chirping sound. The other 2 woke up immediately and joined in. Yes, we are both here, Sareth said in Draconid. She switched to English for David's benefit. As always. The hatchlings launched themselves at Sareth, climbing all over her in their usual enthusiastic greeting. She accepted their attention with much more grace than she had 3 months ago. She even laughed when Storm tried to nest in her elaborate hair. David watched them together and felt something warm in his chest. Not the psychic bond with the hatchlings, though that was always there. Something else. Something like family. Later that night, after Sareth had left and the hatchlings were sleeping again, David stood at his window looking out at the stars. Helen had sent him a message earlier congratulating him on the Earth visit. She'd also included his original maintenance reports, the ones he'd been trying to finish the day everything changed. David laughed quietly. 3 months ago, his biggest problem had been a humming thermal regulator. Now he was helping raise 3 alien dragon babies and preparing to visit Earth as part of a diplomatic delegation. His mom was going to lose her mind. Dawn stirred in her sleep, sensing his thoughts through the bond. David sent back feelings of calm and love. She settled immediately, purring softly. The next morning, David took the hatchlings to the station's observation deck. Dr. Nira had suggested it as a way to teach them about different star systems. The deck was usually crowded with tourists, but today it was nearly empty. River pressed her nose against the window, watching the stars move past. Storm tried to catch them, pawing at the glass. Dawn sat between David's feet, content just to be close to him. That one is Sul, David said, pointing. That's my star, my home. In a few weeks you'll get to see it up close. The hatchlings chirped with excitement. They'd been learning both English and Draconid, switching between languages without thinking about it. Sometimes they mixed both together in ways that made Dr. Nira furiously take notes. Will there be others like you? River asked in English. Her voice was still high and chirpy, but understandable. Lots of others. Billions of humans. Will they be nice? Dawn asked in Draconid. Most of them, yeah. Some might be scared of you at first. You're pretty big and scary looking. Storm puffed up his chest proudly. Good. I am fierce. You're a baby, David said, scratching behind Storm's ear crest. Storm immediately flopped over for belly rubs, which rather ruined his fierce image. River continued watching the stars. I'm glad you found us, she said quietly. When we were cold and lost. Me too, David said honestly. Mother says you saved our lives. Your mother would have found you eventually. Maybe, but you found us first. And you stayed even when it was dangerous. River looked at him with those huge dark eyes. Thank you. David felt his throat get tight. You don't have to thank me. I love you guys. All 3 of you. The hatchlings piled on him immediately, purring and chirping and trying to nuzzle every part of him at once. David laughed and let them knock him over. They might be the size of large dogs now, but they still acted like babies. A Draconid couple walked by, stopping to stare. The female leaned over to her companion and whispered something. David caught the words bond guardian and human. The male nodded respectfully to David before they moved on. It happened a lot now. Draconids treating him with respect instead of contempt. Some even asked him questions about raising young as if he was some kind of expert. David found it weird, but Dr. Nira said it was good. It meant attitudes were changing. That afternoon, Sareth arrived for their daily check-in, but this time she brought another Draconid with her. An elderly female with silver scales. This is Elder Myra, Sareth introduced. She leads the Council of Mothers on our homeworld. Elder Myra studied David with sharp eyes. So you are the human everyone is talking about? I guess so, David said. I have watched recordings of you with the hatchlings. You are unconventional. You let them play instead of training. You hold them when they are frightened instead of teaching them to be strong. Is that bad? It is different, and the results are remarkable. Elder Myra moved closer, examining the hatchlings who were playing in the corner. They are healthier than any young ones I have seen in decades, stronger, more confident. They work together instead of competing. This is not normal for our species. Should I be doing something different? No, you should be teaching others to do what you do. Elder Myra turned to Sareth. I am changing my recommendation to the council. We should send observers to study this human's methods. If we can incorporate even a fraction of his approach into our child-rearing practices, we might raise a healthier generation. Sareth's scales brightened with pride. I will arrange it. After Elder Myra left, David looked at Sareth in confusion. What just happened? You impressed one of the most traditional members of our society. That is significant. Sareth sat down, looking pleased. She will recommend changes to how we raise young. Changes based on what you have shown us. I didn't show you anything. I just did what felt right. Exactly. You trusted your instincts instead of following rules. That is what we have forgotten how to do. Storm came running over, carrying a toy in his mouth. He dropped it at Sareth's feet expectantly. She picked it up and threw it across the room. Storm chased after it with Dawn right behind him. 3 months ago, I would never have done that, Sareth said quietly. I would have told them to practice their flight forms instead of playing games. Do you regret it? Any of this? No. I regret that it took a human to teach me how to be a better mother to my own children. But I do not regret the result. She looked at David. You have given me my children back. Not the perfect warrior hatchlings I thought I wanted, but real, happy, healthy young ones who actually want to spend time with me. River brought David a book, one of the Draconid history texts Sareth had provided. Read to us? Both of us will read, Sareth said before David could answer. She moved to sit beside him. I will read the Draconid. David will read the English translation. That way you learn both. The hatchlings settled around both of them, creating a pile of scales and wings and contentment. Sareth began reading in her language, her voice strong and clear. David followed with the translation, stumbling over some of the more complex words. The hatchlings listened to both, their eyes moving between their two parents. This was family, David thought. Not the traditional kind, not what anyone expected, but real and good and worth protecting. A Draconid mother and a human maintenance worker, raising 3 dragon babies together on a space station far from both their homeworlds. The galaxy was watching them, analyzing them, trying to figure out how it worked. But David knew the secret. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't about tradition or technology or cultural exchange. It was just about love. The kind that crosses species and cultures and ancient laws. The kind that makes you take off your jacket for freezing babies you've never met before. The kind that makes a proud warrior mother admit she needs help. The kind that builds families out of impossible situations. Dawn yawned and curled up against David's side. Storm was already asleep on Sareth's lap. River fought to keep her eyes open but was losing the battle. We should let them sleep, Sareth whispered. In a minute, David whispered back. They sat together in the quiet, 2 parents watching over their shared children while outside the window the stars continued their endless dance. Somewhere out there Earth waited. Somewhere else the Draconid homeworld turned. But here, in this moment, with 3 sleeping hatchlings between them, David and Sareth had found something neither of them had been looking for. They had found home.